I welcome this opportunity to talk to you about homelessness and dementia, and to raise awareness of the challenge many people face when living with dementia or cognitive impairment. People usually think of dementia as an ageing issue, but dementia can affect people from all walks of life at different stages of their life. Alzheimer's Australia, through their program Your Brain Matters, is committed to helping people understand the importance of good brain health in their day-to-day life and the connection between dementia and other chronic diseases such as diabetes, heart disease and stroke.
In 2015, Homelessness Australia stated that on any given night, 1 in every 200 people are homeless. And many people who are homeless or at risk of homelessness can develop a cognitive challenge of some kind. This can range from having a mild cognitive impairment to what may be a dementia. Dr. Faisal Ibrahim, who champions for dignity in care, talks about dementia.
Dementia is not just one specific disease, it's actually described as a syndrome. So it's a disease of a brain that affects one's thinking skill or cognitive function. It affects one's memory and also one's ability to function and live in their own environment. There are many more symptoms that we can describe as dementia. And there are more than 120 types known to date. The most classic or well-known example is what we call Alzheimer's disease. And the one that probably is well known as well is what we call the stroke or vascular related dementia. And there are other rarer type and also the one that we mustn't forget, that dementia can affect all age group, though it's more commoner in the older persons, but we see the increasing numbers of young onset dementia. Other causes that perhaps are not well known are Parkinson's related dementia or conditions or diseases that could be inherited, for instance the familial type Alzheimer's disease, Huntington's disease, but also those due to lifestyle, perhaps too much alcohol or alcohol related brain injury. There are also types of dementia are due to traumatic brain, for instance those who are involved perhaps in their work or perhaps in being unfortunate to actually sustain brain injury. And what is important too is once the person have got the signs of dementia, then we have to talk about timely diagnosis.
There are many types of dementia. Dementia is not a normal part of ageing. Younger people in their 30s, 40s and 50s can have dementia. The early signs of dementia can be very subtle and vague and may not be immediately obvious, and especially so in people who are experiencing homelessness. Dr. Chris Bollen explains some of these signs and how dementia affects the brain.
Different parts of the brain have different functions. The way that the brain functions and then is actually slowly destroyed by dementia is actually then going to have an impact upon how the person has symptoms, whether it's their emotions, their behaviour or their memory. People can also find that tasks which they're usually very good at doing become more difficult and they become more slow. They may lose the ability to recognise well-known people in their lives or places that they know well. Another area they may lose or have noticed changes in is the ability to actually interpret information and questions and follow instructions. These might be written instructions or verbal instructions. Other areas that also are impacted are their behaviour, which may actually become socially inappropriate, and their emotions, which may be far more difficult to control than usual. I'm going to tell you a little story about the man that Alzheimer's disease is named after. So Dr. Aloysius Alzheimer was a physician in Germany in the early 1900s, and one of his patients' names was Augusta Deter. And her husband brought her along to the hospital because she was having problems with memory, she was having some problems with reading and writing, and her usual activities of what the family thought she should be able to do, she wasn't coping with. So Dr. Alzheimer met Mrs. Deter and undertook quite a few tests and wrote copious notes about what was going on. And then a number of years later, she died. She died early at the age of 55. And Dr. Alzheimer wanted to know a lot more about what was going on because no one had worked out what was happening to her. So he examined her brain after she died and found some really important issues had occurred. One of the first things he noticed was that the brain had shrunken. The outer layer was very thin. This outer layer is called the cortex. It's a very important part of the brain when it comes to memory, language and judgment. The other part that he noticed about the cells in Mrs. Deter's brain were that there were two deposits in the brain cells which had caused the brain to change function. And the first one was that there were things called plaques. Now these plaques were things that sit between the cells, on the outside of the brain cells, stopping the important transmission of the brain chemicals. The other area that Dr. Alzheimer had noticed was that there was these deposits within the brain cells, and these are known as neurofibrillary tangles. And what these deposits do is that they slowly increase in size and kill the brain cells by stopping the transport of food and energy which the cell really needs. Over time, as dementia causes progression of the disease within the brain, the deeper parts of the brain are affected. And this has an impact on emotions, behaviour, other functions of the body, as well as long-term memory. However, there are other types of dementia which affect only certain parts of the brain. One type of dementia is very common, is called vascular dementia. Vascular dementia is caused by a change in the blood flow or a reduction in blood flow to certain parts of the brain. You might know this as a stroke. So you might have a big stroke which affects a large part of the brain, or you can have very small strokes which cause problems with the blood flow deep inside the brain. The parts of the brain that are affected will actually then cause the behaviour, the emotion, or the change in function for that person. Another common type of dementia is called frontotemporal lobe dementia. And this is because it affects the frontal part of the brain, which is this area here, and the temporal part of the brain around here and here. When we look at the frontal lobe looks after what we call executive functions. This is our top level way how our brain works. It's about our planning, it's about our attention, it's about how we control our emotions and our social interactions. So with changes in the frontal lobe from dementia, we then start getting changes in how people interact with other people. So they become emotionally more disabled, they become more withdrawn sometimes, their behaviour changes, and they have a lot of problems doing the things in life like organisation and planning, which we all take for granted. The temporal lobe is this side here. The temporal lobe is a really important part of our brain when it comes to the function of how our eyes and ears work. It's not about how we see things, it's how we interpret what we see, it's about what we interpret when we hear. And that's really important when it comes to language. So the type of dementia signs that occur in people with frontotemporal lobe dementia may then affect on their written and their language skills. In frontotemporal dementia, the loss of memory is actually a late sign compared to other types of dementia. It's very important for homeless people who may find that there have been some changes in their memory, their personality or their emotions, to go and get these things checked out. Because not everything is dementia, but it is important to go and see a GP and have a good checkup. The reason being is a correct diagnosis is incredibly important for your future. And the GP can do many simple tests to actually work out what's going on.
Some dementia signs you may see include progressive and frequent memory loss, confusion, personality change, loss of ability to perform everyday tasks. When most people think of the homeless, they picture the person who is sleeping rough or someone isolated from support and care, but that's not always the case. Places such as Wintringham Specialist Aged Care in Victoria provide dignified services for people who are aged and homeless. Speaking at the Wintringham Gardens in Dandenong, Dr Alice Rota-Bartelink explains the diversity of challenges that can lead into homelessness.
It can be particularly close for people that are living on a marginalised existence, particularly economically, where they're living on just scraping the breadline, and they're just managing to keep their head above water, and then a major life crisis happens. It can be around their health, it can be around their relationships, it can be around the death of someone, it can be around loss of job, it can be loss of finances. Suddenly there's that cusp that someone tips over, and that tends to put them in a position where they're not coping as well, they're not able to use the same survival strategies that they normally would use to keep their heads above water, and at that point they tend to tip over, and it tends to lead to a snowballing effect where they can come to rely on alcohol or drugs or negative strategies to cope with life as they try to struggle from day to day to get through.
People who are homeless or at risk of homelessness fall across all age groups, gender diversity and individuality, and include those who are culturally and linguistically diverse, Aboriginal, gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender and intersex. They also cross a wide range of locations.
You know, the majority of people that we have who are homeless that come to our centre would be ranged between 40 to 60, which is pretty disturbing for Australia. You know, you think of that age group as being an age group that would sort of have their life sorted out and be looking to move into enjoying the later part of their lives. But, you know, many of these people are still struggling and have trauma and daily difficulties in their life.
An interesting trend in the area though is that there is a growing number of older single women.
Jenny Kent experienced homelessness in her 60s and came very close to living on the street.
I was on the list for public housing, and there was a delay in the building of same, and my lease had run out in my city unit, and I had nowhere to go. I did what the kids call sofa surfing and went from a friend's house to another friend's house. I was going to be walking the streets with my tiny dog. Daunting. At 64, 65, never imagined it would happen.
We have a lot of people come to our area to retire, etc. So they move away from their support systems, and if things don't go, don't end up the way they want in this area, then they really are at risk of being homeless.
For people who are just in insecure housing through most of their lives, or much of their lives, it can just take one crisis, like something going wrong with their physical health, losing a job, for them to end up in that homeless sort of group.
And sometimes there is a lack of respect and understanding around homelessness, coupled with a stereotypical view that it's all their own fault.
Yeah, I think there's a real association between homelessness and undeserving, and particularly as someone gets older, because there's the perception that if someone's older, they should be wiser and they should have enough life strategies and coping, life experience that they can pull up on in order to enable them to cope and to get over a crisis and to survive and to prosper. And it seems to be emerging more that people are considered that's their life choice. But it's not a life choice, it's just a lack of other choices and support to be able to make a much more dignified lifestyle and to live a better, to live a more dignified life. Yeah.
There are multiple causes of homelessness. For some people, alcohol or drugs can be part of their coping strategy. Increasing numbers of older people are seen in homelessness. There can be many complex and multi-layered health and social factors that challenges a person's cognition.
The people that we see at Wintringham are referred to the service because they have a very much a person-centred care around individual needs and supports. So we get a very challenging, group of people with quite overt challenging behaviour, or people who are a long way down the track of addictions, or have had long-term homelessness, which all of those factors affect someone's cognition in some way. For example, a person who is a long-term drinker, most of the time they have coexisting brain injuries as well through being unconscious from fights, falls and accidents. Most of the time these people also have an underlying mental health disorder, so that will also impact someone's behaviour and their way in which they interact. Then that doesn't preclude the person from developing an age-related dementia as well.
Jenny not only faced being homeless, but also was helping a friend living with undiagnosed dementia.
And I didn't have to be Einstein to see there was a problem. Now at that point I didn't realise it was Alzheimer's, and I don't know, I just knew that there was something terribly wrong. Going downhill fairly quickly. She was losing her purse a lot. I had friends in the city who were telling me that they would find her on a corner, not really knowing where she was. She had no money. She had a purse that was empty, and I queried her about her accommodation. I subsequently found out that her accommodation was total squalor.
Things that used to make sense for them, or where they used to be able to manage the environment and manage their homeless situation, it starts to all become undone, and so it's quite difficult for them to manage.
A lack of access to conventional medical services makes it exceptionally difficult for people experiencing homelessness who are living with a dementia to get the support and services they need at the time that they need them.
To access medical services in a normal way is usually quite difficult, and they will then probably let small niggly aches and pains when we would normally go to the doctor, they would let them culminate to quite a significant illness or disease before they seek help, and then usually the help that they seek is through emergency services and crisis services. That is their inlet, that is their primary care, source of primary care. And then at that time, you know, those diseases have had their toll on that person and really had some real effects on their body systems and processes. So you see a lot of that sort of chronic illness being poorly managed and poorly treated.
We're looking, as I said, at people that are transient often. You may not know where to find them. If you make appointments, how does someone in that situation necessarily keep an appointment? If something else has come up for them or other opportunities, that's not going to be a priority for them. We also know that people who are homeless and at risk of homelessness, they're concentrating, as we say, on their basic living, you know, so going to doctors, you know, talking about concerns that they might notice with their memories, that doesn't come to their mind, let alone the people around them. It's also often responding to someone in that situation needs to be an immediate response, because if someone, for example, attends a drop-in centre, the staff may notice some changes, but if they're not able to offer any follow-up or support for that person, they may not see that person again.
People may not be aware of the dementia services and supports that they need.
We see people that have deficits, and it may be in the way that they think or the way that they speak, and you know, just general body functioning as well. A lot of them come in and you know, they have a history of trauma and self-medication through either alcohol or drug use.
And they said, well, we don't know. You know, we see people with mental health problems. What's the difference between that and dementia? It's very difficult to tell in those circumstances. You know, when you're first meeting a person, when you don't really know their background or their history, whether it's dementia or whether it's a mental health issue.
Premature ageing is often seen in long-term homelessness, which is why people look and are physically older than their age suggests.
People who are younger, who are on the streets, it takes a really big boost to pick them out of that homeless lifestyle. So eventually they will age, and they will age prematurely. Because of the life of hardship that they're having, they don't have the access to medical support. They don't have the access to food. They don't have the access to nice, you know, to nice warm shelter. that takes its toll on the body. Very much victims of violence and aggression and a lot of abuse. So you end up with sort of like a biological age and a chronological age, and so someone essentially becomes, 10 years older than their true age because of that hardship, which means that someone then at the age of 50 is at a point where they actually need to have aged care as opposed to the traditional 65.
Research has identified several risk factors associated with dementia. While there are some risk factors you can't control, such as genetics or age, many risk factors can be managed through lifestyle changes or with appropriate medical treatments. A person's cognition can be affected by multiple factors, including brain injury due to alcohol, drugs or trauma, mental health, physical health such as heart disease, diabetes and HIV, nutritional deficiencies including vitamin B12 and folic acid. Things are changing. There are people with a vision to see improvements to good brain health and people's well-being, who care about understanding and meeting the needs of people who are living with homelessness and dementia.
It's almost intangible for that person to visualise themselves in a positive environment with positive life activities. So, or they haven't even had the experience of it in their life. So you really need to work from the bottom up and just earn some trust and respect with that person and gradually pick away at some of the tapestry that makes that person who they are, and allow themselves to afford themselves some of the luxury that, or some of the positive things that most of us really enjoy, on a daily basis.
Alzheimer's Australia understands the importance of engaging with homelessness agencies and in advocating for timely access to dementia services and support. Claire Beard from Alzheimer's Australia in South Australia explains how this engagement is making a difference.
Hutt Street Centre is a frontline homeless service in Adelaide. It's a place of opportunity and choice, providing support to homeless men, women and families with care and without judgment. Each year, Hutt Street Centre serves around 50,000 meals and has more than 200 people visit the centre each day. Alzheimer's Australia in South Australia and Hutt Street Centre are working together to provide good outcomes in homelessness and dementia. What we do here is work to benefit people who may have dementia or who have a diagnosis, and facilitate appropriate referrals for them, including those to our younger onset dementia key workers and other services they may need. By meeting people who visit the day centre, it is possible to have worthwhile conversations on being brain healthy and explain how someone can maximise their brain health through the 5 simple steps of the Your Brain Matters programme.
The following section can be used as a short educational resource to assist homelessness workers in promoting the 5 simple steps of the Your Brain Matters programme.
Step 1. Look after your heart, because what's good for your heart is good for your brain. It's important to prevent or control things which affect your heart's health, such as having high blood pressure, high cholesterol, type 2 diabetes and obesity. We encourage people to see a doctor if they're worried about this and have a medical checkup. Step number 2. Do some kind of physical activity, because this increases blood flow to the brain. It stimulates the growth of brain cells and the connections between them, and is associated with larger brain volume, which is a good thing. We can all keep active by aiming to do between 2.5 and 5 hours of moderate exercise, such as brisk walking, over the course of a week. Step 3. Mentally challenge your brain. Evidence tells us that doing new tasks or activities helps keep our brain functioning well, and it helps develop new brain cells. This gives us more brain reserve or backup for when our brain health is under stress. Mental exercises may also protect against accumulation of the damaging proteins which we see with Alzheimer's disease. So we encourage people to take advantage of libraries and day centres where they can read a book, learn how to use a computer, or participate in a new activity that makes good use of their brain. Step 4. Follow a healthy diet. Places such as Hutt Street Centre work hard to provide nutritious and well-balanced meals, and that's important for our brain health. What you eat can affect your brain. Unfortunately, we know that a high intake of saturated fats and trans fats, often found in fast foods, pies, pastries, cakes and biscuits, are associated with an increased risk of dementia. It may not always be easy for people all of the time, but whenever possible, promote healthy food choices. Step number 5. Enjoy social activity. Keeping socially active is especially important for people who may have limited opportunity to chat and engage with others. Social participation has been found to have benefits for other health factors related to cognitive functioning, such as vascular condition and with emotion and depression. It is important for people to keep in touch with each other, to stop and chat, and to join some of the social programmes that are on offer at the day centres or the homelessness services. Your Brain Matters is an evidence-based programme for everybody, because being brain healthy is relevant to any age, whether you're young, you're old, or you're in between.
For more information, visit www.yourbrainmatters.org.au.
The numbers of people diagnosed with dementia increases every week. Currently, there are more than 332,000 people in Australia living with dementia. This number is predicted to rise by 1/3 over the next decade. It's also estimated that more than 24,000 younger people are living with dementia. At the same time, significant numbers of Australians are experiencing homelessness. These are people in vulnerable situations who face great challenges in accessing good brain health interventions and access to robust and appropriate dementia services and support at a time when they need it most. The link between dementia and the social causes of the health of homeless people are highlighted in this resource. I hope that this resource will assist you in the critical work that you do in making Australia a better place for everybody and in helping Alzheimer's Australia continue its fight against dementia.